I can still feel the sting of that night's cold air on my skin. The way the porch light flickered as if it already knew something was wrong. And there she was, my twin sister Rachel, standing on my doorstep at 2 in the morning, trembling, bruised, and looking at me with eyes that carried a kind of terror I'd never seen before. I remember the way my breath caught, how the world seemed to tilt under my feet as I tried to understand what could have possibly driven her to me in that condition. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. Because sometimes the people closest to us hide truths we never imagine. I didn't realize it then, but that was the moment everything started to unravel. I still remember how fast everything shifted that night. How one moment I was half asleep on my couch, and the next I was staring at my twin sister standing in my doorway at 2 in the morning, bruised, shaking, and barely able to hold herself upright. I didn't even have time to process the fear in her eyes before the weight of it hit me. Something was wrong, far beyond anything we had ever dealt with before. And the way she clung to the doorframe told me she'd been running from something she couldn't outrun alone. I felt this cold rush move through me, the kind that makes your stomach drop before your mind even catches up. I kept trying to piece together what could have happened, but every answer I reached for twisted into something darker. Seeing Rachel like that ripped open a part of me I thought was long buried, the protective instinct I'd always had as her sister, the one I hadn't needed in years. And yet, in that moment, it felt like I had been preparing for this without knowing it. She couldn't get the words out, but she didn't have to. The panic in her breathing, the marks on her arms, the way she kept glancing over her shoulder, it all pointed in one direction. Whatever had happened inside her home wasn't an accident, and whatever her husband had become, it was enough to send her straight to me. I didn't know it then, but opening that door meant stepping into something far bigger than either of us. And as I pulled her inside, I could feel the ground shifting beneath our lives, pushing us toward a path shaped by everything that had led us here. It's strange how two people can come into the world at the exact same moment and still grow into lives that feel miles apart. Rachel and I used to joke that being twins meant we shared one brain, one heartbeat, one instinct. But as we got older, our paths split in ways neither of us expected. I leaned into independence, building a life where I could stand on my own feet, trusting structure and caution more than anything else. Rachel, though, she kept that softness, that optimism that made people feel safe around her. She always believed the best in others, sometimes long after they stopped deserving it. Growing up, we were inseparable, two kids running barefoot through our neighborhood, finishing each other's sentences, swapping places in school just to see who noticed. Even back then, I felt responsible for her. Maybe it's because I was born a few minutes earlier. Maybe it's because she looked at the world with open palms while I kept my guard up. Whatever it was, that protective instinct never really disappeared. It just got quieter as we built our adult lives. And then she met Evan. At first, I tried to be open, tried to believe she was choosing someone who saw her the way I did, someone who cherished that gentle optimism. But there were moments, small ones, that tugged at something deep in me, a tension in her voice, a shadow in his. Things I brushed aside because I didn't want to smother her or sound like I was judging her choices. Standing in my living room with her bruised and trembling, all those ignored warnings came rushing back like a punch to the chest. I couldn't escape the thought that if I had trusted my instincts earlier, maybe she wouldn't be here like this. And yet, I also knew this was only the beginning of what she had to tell me. When Rachel finally caught her breath that night, the words didn't come out in a straight line. They came in fragments, shakes, half-formed sentences, long pauses where she kept staring at the floor like she was afraid it might open up beneath her. I remember sitting there, feeling my heart pounding harder with every piece she tried to force out, until I finally understood she wasn't just scared. She was terrified of what she had seen, and even more terrified that she wasn't supposed to survive long enough to tell anyone about it. It started with a silver key she found buried in one of Evan's old jackets. She told me she almost brushed it off. But something about the way he guarded his things lately made her look twice. The key led her to a safety deposit box he'd been paying for in cash. She opened it that morning, expecting maybe old documents or something sentimental. Instead, she found a stack of items that didn't belong to him at all. IDs with different names, photos of women she'd never seen before, printed schedules, even notes that looked like tracking logs. And tucked among all of it was a picture of her. She said her hands went numb. She couldn't understand what she was looking at. But she knew it wasn't normal. She knew it wasn't innocent. And when she saw that her routines, her gym time, her commute, her evenings alone were written out like data points, something inside her broke. She realized Evan wasn't the man she thought she married. He was someone else entirely. Someone who had been studying her life with a cold precision she couldn't explain. Listening to her, I felt something shift inside me. Concern turned into anger so sharp I had to steady my breathing. Every instinct I had screamed that she was right. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a bad marriage. This was danger. Real danger. And if those other women in the box meant what I feared they did, Rachel wasn't imagining the threat. She was next. That was the moment I knew we couldn't sit still. We had to act, and we had to act fast. I remember sitting across from Rachel that night, both of us running on fear and adrenaline, trying to make sense of the danger closing in around her. The room felt too small for everything we were feeling. She kept twisting her hands together, her voice wavering each time she tried to explain what she thought Evan might do next. And even though I was trying to be steady for her, I could feel my own chest tightening with every passing minute. The weight of what she had uncovered was sitting between us, demanding a decision neither of us wanted to face. Somewhere in that chaos, my mind drifted back to when we were kids. Those afternoons when we'd switch places just to see if anyone noticed. Teachers, friends, even our own parents sometimes took a moment too long to figure it out. It used to feel like a harmless trick, a silly superpower only we shared. I never imagined that same bond, that same perfect mirror image connection, would become something we might rely on for survival. Rachel's fear was so raw that night. She kept whispering that she didn't want to die, that she didn't know who Evan really was anymore. And hearing that broke something in me. I realized that if I sent her back into that house alone, I'd never forgive myself. At the same time, stepping into her life, even for a day, meant walking straight into the orbit of a man who had already researched her, every move. And now that I understood the depth of his deception, it was impossible not to feel the danger in my own bones. But the choice made itself. If switching places could buy us time, if it could keep her hidden long enough to find proof, then I had to do it. I had to be the one to walk into her life, even if my hands were shaking. By sunrise, we had a plan, and within hours, I'd be stepping into her home, her routines, her world, pretending to be her, hoping Evan wouldn't notice the difference. Walking up to Rachel's front door felt like stepping into a version of my own. Life that had been tilted just a few degrees off reality. The air around the house felt heavier, like it had absorbed every argument, every secret, every moment Rachel never told me about. I kept reminding myself to breathe evenly, to move the way she would, to carry her softness instead of my usual guarded edge. But the moment I crossed the threshold, the truth hit me. No matter how perfectly I mirrored her, this wasn't my world, and my body knew it. Everything inside the house felt controlled, almost staged. The blinds were perfectly aligned, the counters wiped to a shine that didn't look lived in, and even the books on the shelf sat in a strict order that didn't match Rachel's gentle chaos. I could feel Evan's presence in every corner, even though he wasn't there. It was like walking through a place curated to erase her and highlight him. I moved quietly, searching for anything that could confirm what Rachel had found. My hands trembled as I opened drawers and checked the places she'd mentioned. When I found the false panel in his office desk, a cold shock washed through me. Behind it was a folder, and inside that folder was the same kind of material she had described. Documents, timelines, notes tracking different women, different lives, different routines. I kept scanning page after page until one detail made my breath catch. My own name, my workplace, my morning run, my apartment building. My patterns laid out exactly the way Rachel's had been. In that moment, everything inside me went still. The fear, the anger, the disbelief. They all collided into a single, sharp understanding. Whatever Evan was doing, whatever this pattern represented, it was never just about her. I had been in his sights too. Long before I even realized it, I backed away from the desk. My heartbeat pounding so loudly, it felt like it filled the room. And then, cutting through that panic, came the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Evan was home early. The moment I heard the car pull into the driveway, my whole body locked up. It was like every sound in the house froze with me. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the air vents, even my own breathing. I snapped back into motion only when I realized the documents were still. Spread out on the desk, my hands shook as I shoved everything back behind the false panel, trying not to leave a trace. I kept imagining him walking in early because he already suspected something, because he already knew. By the time the front door opened, I was standing in the kitchen, forcing myself into Rachel's soft posture, her slower movements, her polite stillness. But inside, I felt like my heartbeat was echoing off the walls. When Evan stepped in, the air changed. He didn't say anything right away. He just looked at me, not lovingly, not curiously, but with this sharp, calculating focus that made my skin crawl. It felt like he was peeling away layers, trying to see the person underneath the face he thought belonged to his wife. I tried to mirror Rachel's tone, her quiet way of existing, but every second felt like I was slipping on thin ice. His eyes kept lingering too long, scanning me like he was measuring the smallest differences. A tilt of my head, the way I held a glass, even the cadence of my breathing. And each time his gaze sharpened, a cold wave washed through me. Had he noticed? Did he know? He stepped closer, slow and deliberate. And the fear that hit me wasn't just for Rachel anymore. It was for me. Because after what I'd seen in that folder, I knew exactly what he was capable of. Then, as if the tension wasn't suffocating enough, there was a knock at the door. A firm, familiar knock that drew his attention away from me for just a second. That's when everything truly started to unravel. When Evan turned toward the door, I felt a brief rush of air in my lungs, like I'd been holding my breath without realizing it. But the relief vanished the moment I saw who stepped inside. It wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't anyone Rachel had ever mentioned. It was a man with a calm, polished presence. Someone who looked like he didn't waste movements or words. Evan greeted him with a familiarity that made my stomach tighten. And then the stranger's eyes landed on me. He introduced himself as Nathan Hale, Evan's business partner. But the way he watched me felt nothing like a simple introduction. His gaze lingered too long, analyzing me with a sharpness that cut straight through every bit of Rachel's identity I had tried to wear. I could almost feel him peeling away each layer. My stance, my breathing, the way I held my shoulders. And I knew he wasn't seeing Rachel. He was seeing me, the real me. I tried to stay still, to stay soft the way Rachel would. But Nathan kept drifting into my space, asking casual questions that weren't really questions at all. They were probes, tests, and with every slow tilt of his head, every flicker in his expression, I felt the dread rising inside me like a tide I couldn't push back. Then something shifted in the room. A silence passed between Nathan and Evan. Brief, intentional, practiced. And in that moment, The truth clicked in my mind with a force that almost made me dizzy. They knew. Not just that I wasn't Rachel, but that Rachel had run, that I had taken her place, and that everything she found wasn't accidental. It wasn't evidence she stumbled onto, it was bait. The IDs, the names, the logs, they weren't trophies or a personal obsession, they were components of a system, a business, a network built on precision and secrecy. These men didn't act out of impulse. They operated for profit, and we had walked straight into the trap they set. The room felt smaller, the danger sharper, and for the first time, I understood we weren't dealing with a single monster hiding in a marriage. We were standing in the center of something far more organized and far more deadly. The moment Nathan closed the door, the entire energy in the room snapped into something hard and suffocating. Evan positioned himself between me and the hallway, and Nathan drifted just far enough to block the living room windows. Like they'd done this 1,000 times before, I could feel the shift. The pretense was gone. Whatever game they had been playing was over, and I was no longer a confused wife in their eyes. I was a loose thread. Then I noticed movement outside. 2 men, standing near the edge of the driveway, pretending to check their phones. Another near the backyard fence. They weren't hiding. They didn't have to. They thought they were in control. And for a moment, the fear hit me so sharply it felt like my ribs might crack. My mind raced, searching for anything, any angle that could slow them down. And then it hit me the one thing I understood better than they ever could. Data, exposure, consequences. I steadied myself and told them there was a dead man switch tied to everything. Rachel found that if anything happened to either of us, a full backup would go straight to law enforcement. I could hear my own pulse thudding in my ears as I said it, but I held their eyes. I forced myself to look like someone confident, someone holding cards they couldn't see. For the first time, they hesitated, and that hesitation cracked open a window of hope. Then blue lights flashed across the wall. The moment those blue lights bled across the curtains, I felt the smallest shift in the room, like the air itself changed sides. Evan and Nathan didn't move, but something in their posture tightened. They knew attention had landed on the house, and for the first time, they weren't the ones controlling the narrative. I kept my hands steady, my breathing even, and angled myself just enough toward the window that any trained eye would catch the tension in my stance. I knew the officers outside couldn't hear me, so I let my body speak for me. A deliberate step back, a shake in my shoulders I no longer bothered to hide. A glance toward the hallway that wasn't fear, it was a cue. When a beam of a flashlight paused on the blinds and didn't move, I knew someone understood. Everything unraveled quickly after that. The officers radioed for backup, and federal agents flooded the street. Evan snapped first, his calm cracking into something frantic. Nathan followed, trying to salvage control. But their network collapsed under the weight of attention they couldn't manage, or silence. Within minutes, the pressure from outside pushed inward. And then I saw Rachel, shaken, alive, surrounded by agents who had pulled her from hiding. The relief nearly buckled me. For the first time all night, I felt the danger shifting away from us, finally turning toward the men who built it. When everything finally went still, it felt like my body didn't know how to come down from the fear. My hands were shaking long after the agents pulled Evan and Nathan out of the house, long after their operatives were cuffed on the lawn. Relief didn't hit all at once. It came in slow waves, each one heavier than the last, until all I could do was sit and breathe and remind myself that Rachel and I were both alive. Watching her step into the safety of that moment felt like seeing sunlight. After a week underground, she was exhausted, bruised in ways no one could see, but she was still my sister. Still here. And that alone felt like a kind of miracle. Over the days that followed, I learned more about what those men were involved in, how deep their network ran, and how close so many others had come to the edge without ever knowing it. Federal agents dismantled everything piece by piece. And for the first time since that night began, I felt the world shift back towards something resembling safety. Healing hasn't been simple. Trauma has a way of echoing, even in silence. But Rachel and I are rebuilding, holding on to the truth that saved us. Intuition matters, and the bond we share is stronger than fear. I think about that often now. The fragile line between danger and protection, and how quickly it can disappear. If you've ever faced something that changed the way you see trust or safety, I'd truly like to hear your story. Feel free to share your thoughts or experiences in the comments.